The list includes two major solar manufacturing firms, First Solar with a major plant in Toledo, BP Solar with a facility in this region, in Frederick, and Bombard Electric in Las Vegas, which helps businesses in that region, the casinos, the hotels, the shopping centers, shift their energy use. Under greenhouse gas reduction, let's take a look at professional environmental services, an example of the role that expert services can play in both domestic and global markets. This segment is much, much bigger, 140,000 workers in 5,400 establishments. CH2M in Denver is consulting services providing its wares throughout the United States and the world, ecology and environment, science and technical services firm with a large presence in LA. And then there's Black & Veatch out of Kansas City, which is an engineering firm specializing in areas from environmental permitting to remediation. One more definitional cut to consider. We've identified a group of young, super innovative, clean tech industries that cross multiple categories and show enormous growth potential. These industries are populated by companies with a median age of 15 years or less. And most notably, this portfolio of segments, including wind power, battery technologies, biofuels, and smart grid, grew about 8% a year since 2003, or twice as fast as the rest of the economy. So the clean economy is broad and it's diverse, and providing that baseline definition we think is so critical to public discourse and private sector action going forward. It is also disproportionately productive. The clean economy is export intensive, already taking advantage of the demand for clean goods and services coming from abroad. In 2009, clean economy establishments exported about $54 billion, including about $49.5 billion in goods and an additional $4.5 billion in services. Significantly, clean economy establishments are, by our calculations, twice as export intensive as the national economy. Over $20,000 worth of exports is sold for every job in the clean economy each year, compared to just $10,400 worth of exports for the average U.S. job. Now, the export orientation of the clean economy today provides a platform for more exports tomorrow. With rising nations rapidly urbanizing, the demand for sustainable growth in all its dimensions will only grow, and the U.S. has the potential to serve that demand. The clean economy also supports a production-driven innovation economy. We find it employs a higher percentage of scientists than the national economy. 10% of clean economy jobs are in science and engineering, compared to 5% in the U.S. economy generally. Now, as we know, manufacturing and innovation are inextricably linked. This provides a stark challenge to the United States. We will innovate less unless we produce more. By our account, the clean economy is a vehicle for production. 26% of all clean economy jobs are involved in manufacturing, compared to just 9% of jobs in the economy as a whole. Manufacturing accounts for a majority of the jobs in over half of the clean economy segments, with many sectors having a supermajority of production-oriented jobs. Solar and wind energy, for example, have more than 2/3 of their jobs in manufacturing. And some segments, including appliances, water-efficient products, and electric vehicle technologies, have over 90% of their jobs in manufacturing. The good news, clean manufacturing is growing, even in the face of national declines over the past decade in manufacturing employment. Finally, the clean economy is opportunity-rich, providing prospects for a wide range of workers and good wages up and down the skills ladder. The clean economy is easy to enter, available to people of all skill levels. 45% of all clean jobs are held by workers with a high school diploma or less, compared to only 37%
Familia,
of U.S. jobs. Now, once a
también
worker
tú.
enters the field, he or she is more likely to receive career-building training.
ओके तारू
31%
पते
of
टे मने
clean
फोन करना
jobs offer medium to long-term training, compared to just
ते आ
23%
वनस नु ते
of
पाछू
U.S.
इनिशिएट
jobs.
करी तू आनु
The
ट्रांसफर नु
payoff is higher wages. The median wage in the clean
dude this
economy
is
is about
call them and cancel it again
$44,000 for
this
the
is I
average
forgot to
occupation.
update you I mean I know I
That's
need to update you
significantly
I
higher
wanted to tell you this
than
I
the
didn't get a
national
chance to
equivalent of
but fuck up was the
$38,000 in
deal
the UK.
like last time when you did
In
that
summary, the clean economy is the kind
ते
of
जे ट्रांसफर
economy
करी
we
तू ना
want to build
એ
post-recession.
ચૂતિયા લોકો એ મારો જે
Export-oriented,
7381 જે
innovation-fueled,
નંબર છે ને
opportunity-rich, and
વાઘના એ
balanced.
ડિલીટ કરી નાખ્યો હતો
So here's our second finding.
stupid છે
Metros
યાર
are on the
so they
vanguard
had
of the clean
56240214447 and they had
Here's the
562
heart
બીજો
of
જે
the
ઘરનો
American
નંબર છે ને
economy, 100
એ
metropolitan
બે
areas
બે રાખ્યા હતા
that after
ને મારો
decades of growth
એસએસની લાઈન
take
વખતે
up
કાપી
only
નાખ્યો મને ફોન
12%
કરી
of our
કીધું
land
તમે
mass,
વસ્તુ છે like
that
whatever
harbor
so I told
two-thirds of
them
our
okay cancel the order
population,
and so what
and
they
generates
suggest to do is
75% of our gross domestic
set up a
product.
new account
So
with
this is
Brookings
a new economic geography,
okay
developing cities and
and
suburbs, exurbs,
and
and
then
rural towns.
you
And all
can
research
transfer
shows the extent to which these
562402447
top
to that new
100
account
metropolitan areas in the
and as a
aggregate
ઘરનો જે છે
are
ને
driving growth in the clean economy.
ઘરનો I can shut that
In
down
2010,
otherwise if you want to
they
transfer it
constitute an increasing share of clean economy jobs, almost 64% in total. And they include an outside share,
yeah just make a new account
74% of jobs
and
in clean tech
તો
industries,
તું અત્યારના account
including
કેમ છે ને એ તો
extraordinarily
કે
high
તે
shares
પાછું એ લોકોને
in
કીધું
solar
transfer
PV,
કરવાનું
battery technologies, smart grid, and wind energy. Innovative clean jobs are predominantly in the top 100 metros because these places concentrate the assets that drive innovation. From research institutions to intermediaries to commercialization to ultimate deployment. Now, the major metros are also leading the growth of clean economy jobs around the built environment.
and
They
everyone
harbor
is like,
78% of jobs in
everyone is
public
like, तारा
mass
caller ID
transit,
562 क्यों बता रहे
90% of the jobs in green architecture,
हाँ so
design,
my
and
caller ID
construction,
from you was showing
moving people
562
more efficiently,
जी Adeno
and
number
making buildings energy efficient will primarily be a metropolitan act, given that's where most people live and travel and businesses locate.
sure.
Incredibly, metros also include a decent
getting
share of
out
clean
and
jobs that are
5:30.
traditionally rural, with at least 23% of jobs in resource-intensive activities like hydropower, sustainable forestry products, and biofuels, and more than half of organic food and farming jobs. Now, metro economies, of course, do not exist in the aggregate. They have distinctive starting points and distinctive assets, attributes, and advantages. So our research digs deep to profile the clean economy potential of each of the top 100 metropolitan areas. The four metros, New York, LA, Chicago, and Washington, are supersized job centers, with more than 70,000 jobs apiece in the clean economy. In 2010, the New York Metro alone has more than 152,000 clean economy jobs by our calculation. Other major metros, Philadelphia, San Francisco, Atlanta, Boston, Houston, Dallas, are also players, with more than 38,000 jobs apiece as of that year. Yet it's not just about the large metros. As we see here, a very different group of small and medium-sized metros have more than 3.3% of their jobs situated in the clean economy. And Albany leads the way with an impressive 6.3% of its jobs in the clean economy. The power of metros is the power of agglomeration, networks, and clusters. Our report finds that clusters, the proximity of firms to businesses and related industries, boost metros' growth performance in the clean economy, and metros facilitate clustering. Examples include professional environmental services in Houston, solar photovoltaic in LA, fuel cells in Boston, wind in Chicago, water industries in Milwaukee, and energy efficiency in Philadelphia. So we can talk about clusters in the abstract, but it's best to see them in practice from the ground up. So let's travel to Philadelphia, the nation's fifth largest metropolis, which includes the city, obviously, and the surrounding counties, is the fifth largest clean economy job center in the country. So here we find the advanced research engines of the University of Pennsylvania and Drexel in University City.
좋다.
who have partnered together on clean energy research
어제 뭐라도
and have
보는데.
provided a steady stream of talented workers to public and private nonprofit firms
Yeah.
and intermediaries. But these universities are part of the Greater Philadelphia Innovation Cluster, based at the Navy Yard on the Delaware River. This consortium received $129 million in federal funding from multiple agencies to demonstrate the efficacy of new building energy-efficient components, systems, and models. The consortium includes strong support of City Hall, led by Mayor Michael Nutter, who has pioneered smart skills training in the energy-efficient sector, as well as the Philadelphia Industrial Development Corporation, which has been a major investor in the Navy Yard. And then, of course, there are the firms and the companies, the fuel of the economy, located throughout the Philadelphia metropolis. Downtown, we find Meridity Energy, a small smart grid firm with powerful technology tools. The density of Center City obviously supports a healthy mix of highly skilled service firms. So just around the corner is real win-win, which provides finance services to companies making capital investments in energy efficiency. Metro economies cross city and county borders. These different kinds of firms require different urban and suburban footprints. So when we look out to the suburb of Radnor, just past Bryn Mawr and I-476, we find Iberdrola, the second largest wind operator in the United States, a subsidiary of a major Spanish renewable energy company, and an example of the wave of foreign direct investment from Germany, from Spain, frankly, ultimately from China, that can help the U.S. build out the clean economy. The Philly story reveals why cities and metro areas power our economy. Hyperlinked networks of private firms and public and nonprofit institutions that fertilize ideas, share workers, extend innovation, enhance competitiveness, and catalyze growth. So that leads to the final proposition. To build out this next economy, the U.S. must unleash the entrepreneurial energies and dynamism of our metropolitan engines. We compete in a fiercely competitive world. While America continues to debate the legitimacy of global warming research, our competitors in established nations like Germany, Japan, and the UK, and rising nations like China are taking transformative steps to grow their clean economies in the precise places, Munich and Tokyo, London and Shanghai, that drive their national economies. The United States can compete with these and other nations. No other nation can match us in domestic demand, advanced research, venture capital, the power of metro concentration. But our potential will not be realized unless we provide a strong policy platform for the build-out of the clean economy. 4 steps are essential, are outlined in the report. Step 1, scale up markets by catalyzing demand for clean economy goods and services. Markets respond to prices, standards, certainty, as well as the procurement and purchasing decisions of government. Step 2, drive innovation by investing in advanced R&D at scale over a sustained period of time via new distributed networks. The U.S. has a distinct competitive advantage in the innovation space if we fund it and if we exploit it. Step 3, catalyze finance to produce and deploy more of what we invent. We cannot just be a nation of idea generators. We need to produce and manufacture and deploy again. And step 4, align with cities and metropolitan areas to realize the synergies of clustering and place. Now, our competitors know that economy shaping of this magnitude should start at the national scale. And so in a perfect world, we would have a federal government that would create a framework for growth and success. Now, we have seen some of that leadership in the past few years through the procurement driving, market scaling efforts of the Department of Defense, the creation of new, very successful innovation vehicles like ARPA-E, some of the financial investments in the Department of Energy's loan guarantee program, and and the metro supporting investments in new energy regional innovation clusters, like the Greater Philadelphia example, supported by agencies with diverse sets of missions and resources, like the Department of Energy, Commerce, Labor, SBA, Education, and others. But our global competitors are upping their goals, they're expanding their commitments, so we desperately need our federal government to go further and act with vision and ambition and consistency and signals to markets and investors. To scale up markets, Congress should enact a national clean energy standard that signals a long-term, consistent commitment to alternative energy sources at the national scale. To drive innovation, Congress should embrace the call by the American Energy Innovation Council, led by corporate titans like Bill Gates and Jeff Immelt, to invest $16 billion annually. That's about $11 billion over what we now invest in clean energy research and development through ARPA-E, but also networks of institutions that are multidisciplinary and engage seamlessly with the private sector. To catalyze finance, Congress should authorize a technology deployment finance entity, a green bank for short, to provide finance of the right scale and risk tolerance to ensure that ideas generated in America lead to products made in America. And Congress should also rationalize, reform, and selectively extend the myriad tax provisions and incentives that currently support the clean economy, but which are now chaotic, unstable, inconsistent, and frankly obtuse about evoking innovation and steady price declines from maturing clean technologies. And finally, to align with regions, Congress should more than double the number of energy innovation hubs and clusters that are seeded and funded. You know, frankly, it's not difficult to lay out what reforms and investments are needed to grow the clean economy. Our competitors have given us ample guidance on that score. The only issue is whether our federal government, driven by excessive partisanship and ideological polarization, can muster the will to get anything done. Now, fortunately, in the United States, we have a default proposition when our national government falters and goes on a frolic and a detour. Our states act as laboratories of democracy, and as California's Lieutenant Governor Gavin Newsom recently observed, our cities and metropolitan areas act as laboratories of innovation. And so that's how, for the time being, we'll need to build our clean economy in the United States, the hard way, from the ground up. The good news, there is no shortage of policy innovation and political commitment at the state and metro scale, as we're going to hear, frankly, from Governor Ritter later this morning. To scale up markets, California has set an aggressive renewable portfolio standard, 33% renewable energy by 2020. With that strong foundation, San Jose and other cities and counties in California are doing their part to facilitate and accelerate consumer adoption, streamlining or even eliminating building permits for solar panels. To drive innovation, Wisconsin has created the School of Freshwater Sciences at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee to leverage that metro's rising position in the clean economy, and particularly the blue economy. The Milwaukee Water Council is building on this, spearheading a network of scientists and companies to realize Milwaukee's ambition to be the global hub for freshwater research, firm creation, and business expansion. To catalyze finance, Connecticut recently created the Connecticut Clean Energy Finance and Investment Authority, capitalized with some $50 million annually. This green bank could accelerate the generation, the transmission, the adoption of alternative energy. At the municipal scale, New York City has capitalized an energy efficiency corporation to spur the financing, working closely with the private sector on new products, the financing of energy efficiency in the building sector. And finally, smart metros are now moving to build out their special industry clusters. In Greater Seattle, for example, the Puget Sound Regional Council, government and business, has developed a business plan to cement that metro's natural position as the global hub of energy-efficient building technologies. Their smart public-private initiative is to establish a facility to test, integrate, and verify promising energy-efficient products and services before launching them to market. And significantly, that metro vision is being supported by the state of Washington, which is committed to match any federal investment in the testing network, and ultimately that testing facility will be self-sustaining from the private sector. So let me conclude with this vision. Let's imagine a world in 20 years where the clean economy permeates every aspect of our economic and social fabric, and in the process enhances productivity and competitiveness, lowers energy use, energy dependence, spurs further innovation, and provides quality work, quality jobs for a broad cross-section of our citizenry. We believe today's research and the power of millions of consumers and entrepreneurs, tens of thousands of companies, and hundreds of cities and metros gives us the hope that this vision can become reality. We have the data to set a platform for sustainable growth. We have the roadmap to set the foundation for smart investment. We have the entrepreneurs in all sectors, public, private, civic, to innovate and then replicate those innovations. Let's build a clean economy, worker by worker, firm by firm, metropolitan area by metropolitan area. Thank you very much. Couple questions, and then we'll move on to the question back here.
Yeah, we are a small manufacturing company. My partner Roger Cove and I, we've invested about $25 million in the last 3 years in technology upgrades, in innovation, in ways to manufacture products, and a lot of it is in the wind innovation industry. One of the problems is, how does a small voice get heard? We now have an opportunity to start at the foundation of manufacturing from a casting or a foundry type situation as a clean foundry that is different than anything in the world, and we need to find some money. And it's very difficult after we're a small company ourselves, about $40 million. We employ about 200 people, and we've kind of exhausted what we can do on our own, and now we need a place that says we need to be able to go to the marketplace and get funding to build this. It's available now. It's going to happen now. These are things that will employ people right now. A entrepreneur, as you say, going into the marketplace, is he bankable? Are these ideas bankable? Most of your entrepreneurial ideas are muddy and gooey, and they're not bankable. So how do we find a place that takes this muddy and gooey and sticky kind of stuff and says it's real? This is something that creates exactly where you want to go, not 20 years from now, today. I'll invest this afternoon if I can find the person that will do it with me in this process, in the ways to do things, but there's no avenue for a small voice like mine to get anywhere. How do you suggest it?
Where are you located? By where? Michigan. So I think over time, frankly, the kind of investments you're seeking will be more routine in the United States. But we're coming out of an economic model where it was very easy to finance real estate, very easy to finance housing growth, and fairly complicated to finance in the manufacturing and industrial sector. And we had a certain growth model in this country, and we're now transitioning slowly to a growth model that's more productive and sustainable and ultimately inclusive. At the end of the day, for this transition period, because it's nice to talk about 20 years, but you've got a proposition today. I think what we're going to be seeing really is at the local and metropolitan and state scale, the kind of public-private investments that sort of bridge this period where ultimately we can move to more sustainable finance, primarily driven at the private sector. Michigan, from my perspective, is the Germany of the United States. It is production-oriented. It is export-oriented. You could actually see Canada from Detroit. What we need to find within the resources of that state, and I'm not just talking on the tax side or the revenue side, but in the incredible wealth that has been built up in that state from the manufacturing sector, are the right vehicles that can support these kind of propositions. That, to me, is a bridge. I mean, ultimately, if government sets a platform, sends signals to the market about certainty and predictability and stability that we are moving down this path, the private sector, I think, will finance most of this. And that time won't be too far away. Other questions? But you can't ask a question.
No, it's not from me. We have a question from Twitter.
Okay.
And it's from the Millville Partners Group, and they're wondering, how can we overcome the hyper-partisan politics of this?
And as I was saying, we're about to move to our second panel. I think the further on down you go in our system, the less partisan it is. And I think there is a natural, what we would call a pragmatic caucus in the United States. That particularly exists at the local and metropolitan scale, but in many places exists at the state scale, because the members of that caucus, and I'm not just talking about elected officials, but corporate leaders, university leaders, civic leaders, and elected officials, prize place over party and prize collaboration over conflict. They wake up every day saying, how do I make Denver better? How do I make Colorado better? And they don't exist in this kind of ideological food fight that tends to permeate the federal discourse. So I think the way we build out the clean economy and frankly, we restore sanity to our political system is from the ground up and from this pragmatic network of people who understand that the challenge today is to create jobs in the near term, retool the economy for the long haul, and deal with these pressing global energy and environmental imperatives. So, we're sitting in a town that today, day by day, is talking about the debt limit and talking about some very, very complicated budget and tax issues, and hopefully they'll be able to resolve that. But over time, I think the real resolution to partisanship and polarization is by taking a lesson from the practitioners and the pragmatists at the local level. And with that, I am going to introduce Brian Walsh. I think anyone who reads Time magazine or follows the blogosphere is familiar with Brian. He is one of the principal writers, thinkers, observers in the environmental and clean economy scene. And he is an avid tweeter. So Brian will come up and introduce the next panel. Thank you very much. really shows, I think, both that these jobs are more normal than we think, but also there's a real potential for growth there as well. At the same time, what was sort of touched on at the very end, that last question, I think, about the partisan gridlock that we face now, is that we are at a very important juncture here. Now we face a situation where we have a desperate need for high-quality jobs in this country. We're suffering from 9.2% unemployment, and that's on top of the very pressing energy and climate problems that these jobs are meant in some ways to deal with. And we have to worry about energy security. We have to worry about where we'll stack up in the future because, as was clear from before, the United States is very much at risk of falling behind on this area. We see countries like Germany, we see countries like China certainly taking this much more seriously, investing from the top down in a way that we've had a very hard time, I think, in the United States. In the last 2 years, or last few years, we've certainly seen a lot of investment through the Recovery Act, through what we're talking about, what DOE is doing. But at the same time, we face, I think, a concern that there's going to be a cliff, a real, if not just a down cycle, but potentially a really frightening, cliff that we might be falling off of. So with this panel, we're going to really sort of try to get a sense as to where the U.S. is now on the clean economy sector. We'll be talking to some people who actually produce jobs, actually produce products in that sector as well. And we want to see where in that environment are we really poised to see growth. We talked a little bit before about the policy challenges here. We'll go a little bit more into depth there, both talking about what can be done, I think, federally, but also what can be done on the local and metro area where I think we see those green shoots of growth really potentially much more productive than what we might see at the federal level. And then we'll talk really about the need for innovation. We're at a period where I think we need to try something new. We can't necessarily continue the old policies of the past, especially as the sector grows, as clean energy continues to grow. We're going to see, I think, a limit to how far subsidies can go. We're already beginning to see that actually around the world. You might have seen there was a great piece in Foreign Affairs by David Victor at Stanford about his concerns about this not a coming clean tech crash, but certainly a sense that you're going to get squeezed out in the future. So what can go forward? What do we invest our, quite honestly, limited funds in to get the most bang for our buck? So let me start with the introduction for our panelists. To my left here is Dr. Arun Majumdar. He is the first director of the Advanced Research Projects Agency for Energy, ARPA-E, which is the country's only agency devoted to transformational energy research and development. He also serves as a senior advisor to Secretary Chu, and he was the associate laboratory director for energy and environment at Lawrence Berkeley before he joined that. To his left, we have Brian Sager, who is the founder and vice president of corporate development for NanoSolar, really one of the most promising solar PV companies out there right now. He manages the company's government programs, strategic partnerships, and the intellectual property portfolio. To his left is Timothy Richards, who is the managing director for energy policy at the DC office for GE. He represents GE on energy policy and really leads a team of GE government policy leaders in DC and around the world. And lastly, we have James Rossman, who is managing director at Lazards Power, Energy, and Infrastructure Group, where he heads the firm's global efforts on alternative energy. So I really want to talk with you first. Everyone's very excited about ARPA-E. I love, it's the thing that gets people excited here. When I go elsewhere around the world, they really see that as something that's a truly innovative way to get us some of these problems. So tell me a little bit about what ARPA-E does, what your daily job is like, and what kind of purpose it's serving, why we really need it.
I'm excited too. Very good. First of all, let me just take this opportunity to give my best wishes to Andy Repkin, who is no fellow who is going to be here. And certainly best wishes. And thanks to you, Mark, and your team for doing all the heavy lifting for this meeting and the reports, etc. Believe it or not, this is my second public event for the day, so I'm trying to transform my brain and get into this mode now. But ARPA-E was created 2 years ago in the model of DARPA, and it's important to understand the history of DARPA because that was created in 1958 in response to Sputnik when it was felt the United States was using this technology too weak, and there was a vulnerability for the nation, and it went on to create things like the internet and GPS and other wonderful things that you all use today. So no pressure on us. We're supposed to do and the technologies, it is a vulnerability. And you know, Secretary Chu has said it very nicely. When the oil prices go up, we hit the panic button. The oil prices come down, we hit the snooze button. And that's no way to run the United States of America. And so I think this is the time to really invest in the future. And while this is a national security issue, by the way, for the United States, it's a national security issue for China, because they're importing oil as well. It's a national security issue for India and other growing economies. So this is a global market of things. And we need to look at it as a way to innovate, to be able to address not only the United States needs, but frankly the global market, just with what we did with information technology, with biotechnology and others. We need to do it for clean energy technology. And it's a massive market because people are looking for technologies to adopt and to create their own security. Just a few examples. We all know that we are hopefully transitioning a transportation sector, which is a vulnerability, to some element of electrification. So, and that is going on, plug-in hybrid. It's just too expensive. So our way of looking at it is that let's go for that battery, which does not exist today, by the way, but that battery that will make electric cars have a longer range and be cheaper than internal combustion engine cars, so you can sell without subsidies. Okay, so that battery need not be a lithium-ion battery. So we are looking at now. We created a program called PEACE, Batteries for Electrical Energy Storage for Transportation. Just like you have an Intel inside in your most of your computers, you hope you have a PEACE inside in your cars. And this market, again, as I said, it's not just a US market, but worldwide. But to make it to that price point, cost is everything. And so this, whole class. And it's the idea of translating science, what we know about chemical reactions and electrochemical reactions, translate into a device, the first prototype, which is prevention. And that's the area that we are trying to focus on. Solar energy, everyone has access, in the world has access to solar. It's just too expensive to convert that to electricity. And so it's about utility scale about 3 to 4 times more than what we get from natural gas combined cycle, which is the cheapest, 5 cents a kilowatt hour. It's just 3 times more expensive. So just like President Kennedy created a moonshot to go to the moon and return safely within the decade, we have now created a sunshot to reduce the cost of electricity from solar to 5 cents a kilowatt hour within this decade. And that needs innovation. You cannot do business as usual. And it is not just the module. It is balance of system, it is power electronics, and other things. So I can go on and on. But that's the kind of thing that RPE is focusing on, to develop a foundation that will create new industries that perhaps do not exist today. Because that's what DARPA did with the internet and everything else. That's the opportunity we have. And as I said, this is our national security, our economic growth and prosperity at stake, and environmental security. Those are the 3 securities we have.
Just a quick follow-up. Do you, in a venture capital situation, it's a given that most ideas will not pan out. That's part of the deal. Do you feel free to fail in the same way, looking for that one innovation that will really make the difference?
So this is what we do. I mean, the BEAST program that I talked about, we set technology agnostic targets. Okay? So this is double the energy density of today's state-of-the-art lithium-ion battery and 1/3 the cost. We don't care if it's a banana, and that can do it. Okay? So these are, as I said, a whole class of lithium-ion batteries, and there's a competition right now. We don't know which one's going to succeed. But if one of them does, this is a new industry that is created that does not exist. I'll talk about another program called electrofuels that we created. All the fuels that are developed in alternate ways, the biofuels that we talked about, are using photosynthesis. Whether it's sugarcane, whether it's cellulose, whether it's corn, whether it's algae, I don't care what today all biofuels are photosynthetic biofuels. But that efficiency of converting sunlight to fuels is less than 1%. Okay, so which means you'll need a lot of land and water. There's sustainability issues, and we need to go down that pathway to reduce the cost and make it cost competitive with petroleum-based fuel. What we did in RP is to create a completely different route of creating biofuels without using photosynthesis. You could do that. You could take electricity from nuclear, electricity from wind or solar, use bugs, which are non-photosynthetic bugs,
And there's a lot of biology that's non-photosynthetic. You and I are non-photosynthetic. We're not green. So use the bug to fix carbon dioxide, use the energy from electricity, fix carbon dioxide, make oil. And people thought this is really risky. This is almost impossible. Well, in a year and a half, people are making oil in the labs now at MIT, at NC State, and other places. And that's the kind of opportunity which, of course, electrofuel industry does not exist today. But if we had not invested and taken the risk, and many of them will fail, no one else would. This is pre-venture. The venture capital wants to see that first prototype before he invests. I'm from the Silicon Valley, so I know exactly what they're trying to do. This is before that, to create the industry, just like TCP that was created in DARPA in 1968. That's when it started. Okay, there was no industry of internet at that time, but that's when it started, and you create the foundation that you create multiple industries out of that. So I think that's where we are.
Brian, I know we talked a little bit before about how NanoSolar is doing right now. It's really, as I said, one of the most innovative PV companies out there. I think your stuff is sold out for quite a while. You have a better chance of getting a ticket to a Justin Bieber concert than you'd have if you don't already have a reservation for one of your products. So give me a sense of where you are now in the market globally, especially, and some of the challenges you still face as you continue to grow.
Sure. NanoSolar is almost 10 years old, and like many overnight successes, it's taken that long to get to where we are. From the perspective of what really the early R&D stage was for us, proving out the technology, proving out pilot line processes, proving out the prototype attributes, we were able to access a lot of funding from the federal government, everything from Department of Defense to DARPA funding to National Science Foundation to Department of Energy. So a wide variety of R&D funding mechanisms federally. We had state-level support, and we were also able to raise about $400 million in private equity through 4 funding rounds. We strongly believe, and I personally believe, that if a technology is promising, if there's a value proposition and it's potentially scalable, that high-quality technology innovation can find funding through ARPA, through DARPA, through other mechanisms. And many of our sister companies in Silicon Valley have also received funding of various sorts precisely along that pathway. The challenges for growth of a company are the scaling framework, and in particular, it costs hundreds of millions of dollars to build up a factory. So things like the Department of Energy's Loan Guarantee Program or other mechanisms like that are very helpful. And once you've built that factory and you've got product, you run into a conundrum, which in my view is almost a textbook definition of irony, in that the innovation that excited the early investors, be they the Department of Energy, Defense, or private equity investors, the potential for disruptive growth from that innovation is perceived in a risk-averse commercial banking culture as a source of huge risk. So the very innovation which drives the early investment impedes the later investment. And in that later investment mechanism, how do you get past those issues? Well, the more innovative the technology is, whether it's bacteria-driven biofuel production or printed solar photovoltaic cells, it's untested in terms of durability, in terms of the value proposition over the whole value chain in which that product is being played out. Any new product, by definition, has no operating history because it's a new product. So when a debt financing entity comes along to do some project with this new technology or this new innovation, one of the things they'll do is go to a third-party engineer and say, what's the risk associated with this, so I can figure out what my debt structure should look like. And the company that's got that innovation says, well, it's a new product. There is no 25, 30-year operating history. And the third-party engineer says, well, I can't assign a risk. And then the debt financer says, well, I can't assign debt. And so our customers then have a challenge. What do they do in this situation? They can either wait, which is what many do, wait until the operating history is sufficiently developed that you've got a statistical de-risk for underwriting of any debt financing for downstream projects, or you can go for pure equity projects, which are statistically relatively rare. And in either case, that slows down the manufacturing ramp up because you are waiting or dealing with a risk aversion, the collision of two cultures, the R&D risk embracement culture and the commercial banking risk aversion culture collide at the exact scale when a company has a new product with new operating history, when that company is trying to become bankable, and that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about debt financing. The other side of the risk, besides the technology, is the balance sheet risk. So you might say, well, I've got a warranty for my product, but the customer might say, well, you're a 10-year-old company and your product warranty is more than twice the duration of your company's history to date. How do I know you'll be around in 20 years? Your balance sheet is such and such, but what is it going to be in 5 years or 10 years or 20 years? So just the scale of growing companies out of the R&D stage to where you have mitigation of both the technological risk from the risk-averse commercial banking culture for bankability, as well as the reduction in risk for balance sheet risk for a company which just isn't at the scale of GE. Both of those are really important issues that every company at our scale tackles.
Tim, GE clearly is already a major player in clean tech, and across the entire really breadth of the clean economy, from water to gas to wind, now increasingly to solar as well. Give us a little intro into all those facets, I guess, of GE's role in the clean economy, both nationally but also as it functions in metro areas. I know, for instance, out of that report, you play a major role in the fact that Albany, not the city that will jump to your mind, actually has more per capita clean economy jobs than anywhere else in the country.
Well, thank you very much, Brian. As you say, GE is a long-standing, established company, and I think it's important to think about some of the aspects that GE brings to this discussion, because GE, of course, is Thomas Edison's company. So for us, when we talk about innovation, it's truly in the blood. This is a company that was built around innovation, always having the first products, the best products. We were one of the original companies in the Dow Jones, and we're the only one that is still in the Dow that was in the original Dow. And how do you get there? I think it ties directly back to innovation, because if you don't completely commit yourself to innovation and being dynamic and taking risks to make sure that you're transforming the company, you're not staying tied to what you've done historically just because that's the way you've always done it, you won't. It's proven. You can't stay at the top, and you can't stay in the Dow Jones Industrial Average. So I think that's an important starting point. Now, I was quite pleased. I hadn't realized that Albany was the top cluster when it comes to clusters, and I do think that that's a really great story, because, of course, GE's power and water business is headquartered in Schenectady, New York. That means our wind business in particular is there, the headquarters of the wind business, and we've been adding jobs in that wind business. It's the largest U.S.-owned company in the wind industry, the leading supplier of wind turbines in the U.S. market. We also, though, it's very important, we also have in Niskayuna, New York, also in that Albany cluster, it's where our Global Research Center is located. And so we have hundreds of PhDs doing research much in the clean energy area in Niskayuna, New York. And I think that clearly contributes to the fact that the Albany area is a leader nationwide. Let me just talk about a couple of other metropolitan areas in a way that also highlights the range of work that GE does in the clean energy sector. We view, just as President Obama does, we view clean energy as everything from solar and wind and other renewables through gas, high-efficiency gas turbines, and nuclear energy. And we are the largest exporter of clean energy by that definition, particularly because we export so many gas turbines. Our gas turbines are made in Greenville, South Carolina. We have about 3,100 employees there. We've been increasing employment in Greenville over time, and we've been investing in these gas turbines to make them constantly more efficient and lower emissions. And our most recent investment is actually entirely based around making those gas turbines work with a renewable energy heavy economy. So in particular, what that means is being able to cycle the gas turbines so that they're able to balance load. When you have wind blowing, you can cycle down. When the wind is not blowing or the sun is not shining, you can cycle them up. And it really is a very effective way to keep on increasing the percentage of renewables that you can have on the grid. So that's Greenville, Schenectady and Greenville.
I'll just mention Wilmington, North Carolina. That's where we have our nuclear business headquartered. We have about 1,600 people in Wilmington, and that's a very heavily engineering-oriented workforce. And we've also been investing in the local community college to help develop the future technicians who can actually fill the jobs that we need to fill, because there are a lot of specialized, but not master's degree or PhD level engineering types of jobs that you need to fill. One more business to mention is our water business, based just outside of Philadelphia, another one of the clean energy hubs. Our water business is a membrane and chemicals business, but the membrane is used for water filtration and can be used for both municipal and for industrial applications. So what it comes down to is we've got a really vibrant set of businesses. If you add those all up, it's about $21 billion of total revenue from our clean energy businesses, and it's been growing, and we've been investing here in the United States and around the world. I would say that not all is rosy, and we have to recognize that the clean energy business does depend, just as actually the entire energy business depends fundamentally on government policy. It always has. It's a heavily regulated business, and the fact is that the current impasse here in Washington is raising issues. And one very clear example of that would be for our wind business, where the production tax credit for wind is scheduled to expire at the end of next year. And you already see that there has been a decline in the rate of installation of new wind projects here in the United States, especially here in the first quarter of 2011. It's dropped. So we've got to watch that closely. It's a real challenge, and I think the solar industry could have a similar challenge as tax credits expire there, electric vehicle charging stations. It goes on and on. So careful work has to be done. I know Bruce spoke about the value of a clean energy standard. Perhaps in the next round we can come back to that. But there's a lot of policy aspects that need to be addressed.
Just as a quick follow-up, I mean, we have this feeling, I think the U.S. is behind when it comes to getting that investment, to deploying that clean tech. Is that the way it looks from where you're standing as well?
Well, where I'm sitting, I think the U.S. is in very good shape right now in terms of our innovative capability. So I think a lot of the ideas are there. When we've done outreach to take in good ideas in the clean energy space, we get a lot of great ideas from U.S. innovators. The biggest challenge is whether you're going to have the long-term certainty about the market being there to convert that into investment here in the United States. And that's really important because we have the opportunity to be an export powerhouse in clean energy. But if we don't have a domestic market, you won't be an export powerhouse either. So it actually all really ties together. You will have the growth in China, you will have the growth in Europe in these clean energy areas, but will the U.S. be positioned to take a major part of that?
Jim, what's Ozark doing in this field really to help play a role in creating and scaling up these kind of tech firms that we're talking about?
Thanks, Brian. And help is an unusual word to use around banking, but we actually sit in a very
it's out of the goodness of your heart, I know.
I guess we're the ones who are sort of commercially incentivized to actually go out and find the bankable ideas. And so as a result, we sit in a very interesting nexus point where our job is to go out and scour the country looking for the innovative companies which we think we can match up with the capital that's available, both primarily in the private sector, but we can develop good public financing ideas. We work on those as well. And I think many of the things that we're seeing, and this is my full-time job is really focused on the U.S., on growth companies. We see a lot of the challenges that the panel is echoing, and we could rapidly fire them off. It's is there really going to be adoption of these technologies? Brian, you sounded like my underwriting committee that we often have to face when explaining why we're covering the companies. The capital required to scale, and it's not just that initial capital to go from being a pilot program to having your first commercial facility. It's really going from that first commercial facility up to your 10 projects as your sales build.
and the market is changing every year, and it's rapidly becoming a global market. We've cited China. You can talk about India, Eastern Europe, South Africa, North Africa. It's a rapidly globalizing industry, and in many ways it's very disruptive to the young companies who are trying to play into what they thought was Europe for a while, and the subsidized regime there. And they're finding they can no longer just go to a Munich beer hall and sell a lot of solar panels. They now have to get malaria shots and go to places they'd never heard of because these people are putting solar panels in their neighborhoods, and so it's a very different market. So globalization is having a big impact. And there's one theme we didn't speak about on the challenge side, which is that this isn't social networking. This isn't Twitter. This is young companies are up against large incumbents. So a biofuel company is competing against Exxon. A solar company is competing against I mean, the incumbency issue is a big theme for us, and it often leads, I think, to alternative energy companies thinking about strategic partners a lot earlier than other innovative technologies. On the positive side, what we find very encouraging is the innovation theme in the U.S. It's a great deal of innovation taking place in the U.S. right now. But also we're moving into a greater installed base. So you're now seeing a wind market in the United States that has close to 45 gigawatts installed. You have a solar base that's rapidly growing, and you have a global installed base. And so what that means is that we're learning things about these products, and we're also developing ancillary industries, service industries around those businesses. We're finding that in wind that actually domestic companies do quite well because the components are large and need to be manufactured locally. In fuels, we're way beyond ethanol. We're into the sunlight-less, biofuels now. So we're moving into the second and third generation of products. And as a result, as these businesses scale and new technologies are developed, cost is coming down. So I think we're sort of short-term, given what's going on in Europe, given what's going on in the lack of clarity coming out of Washington. As an alternative energy banker, we're sort of short-term neurotic, but we're long-term bullish about the industry. And I think, though, that the unique challenges, because this isn't social networking, you need large amounts of capital, is that it's critical that there are policies in support of these industries to help bring them from those very early stages through. Because as Arun said, it's 1 in 100 at the angel stage or his stage, and then it's a 1 in 10 shot at the VC stage. It's got to be a 1-to-1 shot 5 to 10 years later for this industry to survive. And we could talk about, and so the final point I would make is that the diversification of the industry. It's no longer solar and wind and biofuels. It's we're finding very innovative things taking place in the United States around recycling, taking dirty plastic and turning it into crude at $40 a barrel, taking wet garbage, doing industrial scale composting in places like Boston and Vancouver, which are really quite exciting developments. And a lot of these guys are technology agnostic and they're process smart. And I think we're going to have a future of alternative energy companies who are quite good around engineering and process. And that's going to help, I think, sort of take the United States to the next level. And it's an area where we play quite well.
Aaron, I'm going to go back to you. Bill Gates and his other heavyweights, American Energy Innovation Council, I mean, they're suggesting we spend billions more on R&D when it comes to that side of things. As you point out, we are pretty good at the idea side, but how could we get better? I mean, if what are your real wish list for improving that innovation system when it comes to Energy for America?
I think I agree with everything that has been said. I mean, from where we are in ARPA-E, that has to go to the next stage of the first class plant. And that is, as you were pointing out, it is very difficult to get financing because this is not going to be paying off in 2 years or 3 years like software does. This is going to be longer term, and access to low-cost capital is absolutely key because if you do not have that, you're not going to have the first of a kind plant out here, and that's going to be cherry-picked by other nations as it's going on. And once you have sunken costs somewhere else, and if that region has demand, as was pointed out, the next stage of commercial or pre-commercial plant will be there as well.
and we have just lost the access to that technology. And once you have the first of a class in a manufacturing plant going somewhere else, you will likely see R&D going out there as well. And that's sort of a bread and butter. So there's a chain effect that could happen. And it's really important to use, as was said, to use the local demand out here to create some demand for clean energy so that some of it stays out here, actually a lot of it stays out here, but also providing the access to low-cost capital to be able to keep the in-between manufacturing out here. So you really need to look at it as a system. And while RPEs are the really upstream, you got to look at the whole stream and make sure that we create the local demand as well as the financing of it.
Just a quick follow-up. Unless there's some kind of pull policy, some kind of guarantee of demand, are we going to keep hitting this problem again? We talked about some of the policy choices out of the reports about a clean energy standard. I mean, is that a must really if this is going to break through?
Well, I think you have things like renewable portfolio standards. I think 29 states. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong, and varying kinds. And so that's a demand pull. But as I said before, I think I said this, that many of the assets on the grid, for example, are 2 years beyond their lifetime. And at some point, there's a vulnerability out there that utilities and ISOs and all will have to address that. And the question is, could we use that demand pull that is likely to come to create those technologies that are not only will be deployed out here, but deployed elsewhere in the world, because the grid is growing as faster in other parts of the world than out here. But we could use our demand to do that. And that's the opportunity I think we should make available. Some of it is creating RPS and hopefully some clean energy standards. But some of it is just hitting asset walls. And it's the reliability of the grid, et cetera, that we could rely on.
Brian, you really, I think, diagnosed the financial troubles that face a company like yours when you're trying to scale up. So what kind of help do you need? I mean, you, again, sort of, if you had the power to make that happen, what kind of system would you craft?
I would balance demand and supply side incentives. The demand side, RPS, clean energy standards are all critical, but in the absence of supply side incentives, you can view the demand side of the United States as an enormous economic stimulus package for Beijing. So if we don't want the U.S. taxpayers to demand products that can't be produced in the U.S. because there's no manufacturing base, we better start supporting the manufacturing base in the U.S., grow the American manufacturing economy as well. Some very pragmatic things that we can do. One example would be product warranty insurance for new products. These products that have no operating history, the reason that their underwriting of the warranties and insurance products and warranties is so very difficult is precisely because of that lack of operating history coupled to a less than enormous balance sheet because you haven't grown to that scale yet. But the federal government, arguably, may have that balance sheet. So could we have a federal backstop of warranty insurance for new products? And it would look like this. You talk to the insurance industry, you figure out statistically in a particular technology thread how much data they need to be able to underwrite a particular financial product to support the growth of that product and the companies that produce that product. And you backstop the warranty during the period in which that data is being collected. At the end of that time period, you hand it off to private industry. So it's a public-private partnership. In solar, that might look like 3 or 4 years of support federally to backstop a 25-year warranty, but at year 3 or 4, it's now in the hands of private insurance industry who are soothed by the mathematics and statistics of the data from year 0, 1, and 2. So very, very low cost way to go. We've done a number of modeling exercises and found that the return on investment is anywhere from 4 to 10x. So this pays itself off on an annual basis in a few months. So in an era where we're trying to be fiscally prudent and financially conservative, this kind of policy would be really helpful to kickstart the industry. A perfect place for that would be in the green thing. And folks have asked, is there any federal precedent for this? Yes, there's the crop insurance that the Department of Agriculture has put out. There's the credit subsidy risk insurance the Ex-Im Bank has put out. There's a number of federal programs that have shown effectiveness in return on investment arguments, which we could learn from and develop for this clean energy economy in a way that really would stimulate manufacturing growth in the U.S. The other thing we could do is slightly tune federal policy in ways that make enormous differences for smaller companies, but barely impact the federal financing. And what do I mean by that? Well, you may all have heard about this 48C tax credit about a year ago, almost a year and a few months. And there was a lot of, self-congratulations by folks, some of whom are in this room, that this is a fantastic policy because the metric for success was defined as oversubscription. It was 3x oversubscribed, so therefore it's successful. Well, if you travel out to Silicon Valley and you talk to the companies that receive those 48C tax credits, no one has been able to monetize a single penny. So why is that? Two reasons. First of all, any company that's building up Factory 1, as we pointed out, or Factory N, is spending hundreds of millions of dollars to do so, and you've got so much net operating loss accrued that the ability to use that tax credit directly is several years downstream. The other way to monetize it is to sell it to a third party. Selling it to a third party, has some arcane tax structure which we didn't get into in this forum, but the critical aspect that was not properly addressed by Congress was the 5-year credit recapture period. And that single term has killed the monetization of the tax credits by any company that's at a scale that really needs them. Because we go to a third party and say, we would like to sell you this tax credit, and the third party will say, well, how do I know you're going to be around in 5 years as a partner? If you go away in year 4.99999, the tax credit goes to zero. So the only way I can do the deal with you is if you give me a letter of credit for the full value of the tax credit. Well, that doesn't quite work because not only so if the 5-year credit capture period was waived for companies under a certain scale, as measured by production output, as measured by revenues, whatever the right metric might be, that would enormously enable already allocated funds in a way that can actually stimulate the economy now. At a more meta level, no one talked to any of us in Silicon Valley about this tax credit before it was structured. So it was a very, very well thought out application process, really looked at greenhouse gas emission abatement, life cycle analysis, financial growth. It was very comprehensive, but it didn't address the operating needs of small companies that actually would use it. So a takeaway message is talk to us.
He's right here, Tim. Tim, I know you have some thoughts on this as well in terms of what sort of policy gaps and whether it's green banks, things like that, that can hopefully solve some of these problems.
Well, first of all, I really think Brian's point is a very good one about looking at both supply side efficiency and demand side efficiency. They're both important. And I would add a third part because it sometimes literally slips through the cracks, but that is when we think about the overall energy system, transmission and distribution efficiency. It's an area that we as a company have invested a lot in through our smart grid business, our digital energy business. And we're investing a lot in the software to manage grids that will help make it more efficient. So I think if we think about supply side, demand side, and delivery efficiency, and we really look at the entire package, and we should not just incentivize the demand side, but incentivize the entire system. That's one point. A couple of specific things. Bruce talked a little bit about the recommendation for a clean energy standard. The Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee has been looking at that idea, has actually solicited public comments on it, and so far has not moved toward legislation. But that's one idea, one way that you would actually be able to put forward a national policy that would actually create the certainty that we've all talked about, the long-term commitment and certainty that we've all talked about. It's not necessarily the only way to go, but it is one of the only ideas that's out there that has been clearly defined or has been somewhat defined, and which could provide that basis. So I think that's an element that's really important. Tax credits, obviously we're in a time where everything that scores negatively from a budget sense is under intense scrutiny. But I do think that a lot of these renewable tax credits create way more in terms of total tax revenues than they cost. They probably actually don't really cost anything. And they need to be looked at closely because the negative implications of allowing them to expire without some equally efficient and effective alternative are devastating to everything we're talking about here. And then the last couple of things I want to mention, because the report also does talk about the export opportunities and the fact that building a strong U.S. economy can help us in the clean energy area, can help us become an export superpower. There is legislation on the Hill right now to renew Ex-Im Bank. That actually is extremely important and hasn't really, so far, our clean energy industry hasn't gotten strong enough to do a lot of exporting, but the potential is certainly there. And without an Ex-Im Bank, we're facing competition from other countries that do have export credit agencies, and it would be very difficult. And then, as a general matter, I think that there's a lot that can be done with new free trade agreements. There's 3 free trade agreements that are now on the Hill for approval. All of them actually have good clean energy language in there. It's kind of sprinkled throughout, but they're all actually pro-environmental in many ways. And new negotiations are going on, for instance, in the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and there's a real effort to look at environmental trade issues in that context. So I think we need to be doing that. Even as we look at our domestic policies, we also need to be looking at how we create the right international environment.
And Jim, if you could pick up on some of that too. He mentioned the Ex-Im Bank. What kind of role that can play in getting some of the financing going?
Yeah, no, I'm glad we brought the theme back to export, which is what Bruce began with, because that's what we see, I guess, in the banking world. We see the U.S. domestic market is really quite nascent, but a global opportunity that is massive, and in some ways a lot more mature and forward-thinking in their policies. And the Ex-Im Bank in particular, I think you're right, it's because the domestic base here has been smaller for export, but it is growing. I think if you look at the amount of Ex-Im Bank loans that we've seen over the last 3 years, it's probably doubled each year in the past couple of years. It's likely to double again in terms of their commitment of capital. It's a relatively small overall asset base, but I can give you multiple examples where $10 million here in a loan guarantee, $20 million there, $50 million really provided some of that bridge capital, not so much at the early stage, but at that second stage going from commercial plant 1 up to the next level, at least providing some bridge capital as the technology has improved. So I think the Ex-Im Bank is a really nice model for how that can be done. I also think that we have to do a better job unleashing the private capital. A tremendous amount of money has been raised in infrastructure funds looking for either high single-digit or low double-digit returns. And I don't think we want to get into a debate on the arcane tax policies that have encouraged tax equity to be the financing source for large wind and solar utility-scale plants. But there's something that doesn't seem intuitively right when you're just sort of selling the investment to someone who has who's getting a tax benefit, maybe completely unrelated to the industry or doesn't have an expertise, versus actually incentivizing infrastructure funds who want to be long-term 25, 30-year energy owners. And so I think there's work to be done on how we harness the private infrastructure capital. I think there's also costless ways of thinking about our export policy. Many of the alternative energy companies have management teams, and Brian, you can speak to this, who are under a lot of stress just raising capital for their build-outs. For them to have to travel to South Africa 1 week, Bangladesh the next, they don't have the global sales channels of a Schneider's or a Siemens or a GE's. And what we're finding increasingly as we move into this mature or second stage of alternative energy, that not only do they have capital problems, they simply have management problems and resources problems to reach global markets. And I don't know how, I think there may be a policy solution there where you can help channel how people are connecting with these markets, but these are not traditional connections. It's when it's selling mass to the UK. It's selling, as I said, solar process skills to South Africa, and there are new channels being built, and the new markets are really those where people haven't thought of, because solar is great in great insulation areas, and it's not about just where your labor population is, it's where the sun shines best. Wind is in places like the upper Midwest and parts of the world we never thought of. There's tremendous opportunities in Chile where it rains 1 week a decade, but they have massive mining operations that where you can sell renewable energy at 10 or 11 cents a kilowatt hour without subsidy. And so it really takes a different mindset in thinking about what are the new global sales channels that have been created by these new industries, because the sourcing of the feedstock is different than we've dealt with before. And I think government and policy support can play a role. And certainly, I'll go back to the incumbency theme, which I don't think people emphasize enough, is that if you're going to support electric vehicles or natural gas vehicles, there's a big chicken and egg problem. You have to think about whether a single policy statement should be on the table that really, requires or mandates some usage, because when you have, 100,000 filling stations, they're not going to go to EVs or NGVs in, 1 year or 5 years, not even 10 years. It's a big commitment.
Right.
And so I think the incumbency issue needs to get more attention.
There's some time to take some questions from the audience. If you can identify yourself, and if you direct it towards certain panelists, let us know as well. I can sit there first.
My name is Martin Apple. I'm president of the Council of Scientific Society Presidents. I think the future of the country depends on our ability to nurture and capture creativity. And I think as I look across this spectrum, from embracing risk to being risk averse as we keep moving down the line here, I'm wondering about the future and how do we get capital built again the way venture capital originally was, in which entrepreneurs who made money started investing it in other entrepreneurs who were trying to start companies. And that was the seed money that built. What we have now in venture capital is mezzanine financing, in which they skip the seed stage because they're risk averse. And as we're in a down economy, they're even more risk averse. So what incentives can you see that would rebuild the seed capital for the beginning entrepreneurs, the creative people who we need to nurture?
Sure.
So when NanoSolar was started, our first 10 angel investments came from 10 successful entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley who all put in small amounts of money. This was in the nuclear winter of funding back in late 2001, early 2002. So it was a big deal to pull out a checkbook and sign it for any value other than zero. And for them to do that, I think it speaks to your point, which is well taken, that entrepreneurs have to help other entrepreneurs from an angel funding perspective. I do think in the Valley that exists, much less so in the rest of the U.S. And I think connecting people from one innovation region to another and really emulating best practices is the way to do that. So folks who might be in the Research Triangle, North Carolina, need to see culturally how entrepreneurs help each other at the early angel stage. Also, there is a set of venture capital funds which specialize in early stage investments, and they do a superb job at vetting those companies for the kind of risk profiles they're willing to do. But many VCs, as you say, don't specialize in that era. So I think that a lot of entrepreneurs think of venture capital as a monolithic block, but it's actually a portfolio of risks, risk profiles as well. And some venture capital firms have in their mission statement to accept a certain level of risk for a certain expected return, and others are different. And so you need to target, we as entrepreneurs need to target our pitches at the early stages to the venture firms that can embrace that level of risk and have done so historically well.
For the Twitter town hall question.
Yes, we have a question from Twitter from Taryn Norris from Americans for Energy Leadership. He's wondering, what's America's comparative advantage over China in the clean economy?
Anyone want to grab that? Is there one?
Yeah, there is. There's several. Yeah.
Okay. Well, yeah.
Maybe.
Oh, sorry. He's here apparently. Oh, go ahead.
I'll take a stab at it and let Jim say some words too. I think first of all, the U.S. We've just already talked about innovation, so I think you need to start with innovation as the area where the U.S. has tremendous capability, and But I wouldn't finish there. Manufacturing, we do not need to accept that we are not capable of being competitive in manufacturing. In fact, GE, I mean, just looking at our own company, we have actually been investing in additional manufacturing in the United States. We've added about 15,000 U.S. jobs 15,000 U.S. jobs, 6,800 of them have been in manufacturing in the last 10 years or so. So we're continuing to invest here, and we see the newest U.S. manufacturing as quite competitive globally. Or we wouldn't be doing it if it wasn't competitive globally. So I don't think that we should assume that that the U.S. can't be competitive. And our whole previous conversation does lead back to the things that have to be done to be competitive in the clean energy area. But innovating and adopting best manufacturing practices are the two things that we know we can do if we have the markets.
Yeah, it's innovate. The level of innovation that takes place in the United States is simply it's multiple times what we see elsewhere. The engineering and process skills here, which I think are increasingly important, and also we don't look at all manufacturing as just a lump. I mean, there's some manufacturing certainly which lower end, commoditized, it adds very little value to the overall chain. We're focused on the more complex elements of the supply chain, where really technology innovation, education is quite important. And also, you have to think about the pools of capital that are formed in the U.S. You know, there are venture capitalists who've been burned in alternative energy, but it is a very sophisticated venture capital community. There's also a large network of, we call sort of family offices, high net worth groups, which have really, who are very focused and are looking for differentiated strategies that we have found quite supportive of alternative energy. I see the Chinese for now are really pretty heavily reliant still on direct government loans and provincial support. They have massive hurdles of their own. The jury is still out in terms of their own efficient allocation and whether they need 80 turbine manufacturers when the rest of the world has decided we really only need about 10, and whether we need hundreds of solar panel manufacturers, whether we need polysilicon coming out of every single town. I mean, there are, I think we are in the first inning of the green economy, and I think, at least from my standpoint, is that I rarely go to China anymore. It's really just traveling around the country to the various centers and trying to identify those bankable ideas to help, as we said at the beginning.
I would say, I mean, the question was about competitive advantage with China. Number one, I'm a recovering professor, spent a lot of years at Berkeley. I would say our system of higher education, the university system, the national lab system, we have the head of Oak Ridge National Lab right out here. That is a very, very unique thing. And that is, number one, our competitive advantage. We should never underestimate the power of that human capital that we create out here. The United States has always in its history have been able to attract the best talent from around the world. And we should continue. I'm a beneficiary of that. We should continue to do that. Other nations are not like that. And we have always attracted talent out here and unleashed them in this ecosystem of higher education and national labs, et cetera. We have to do that. We have to continue attracting talent, because there'll be a talent competition at some point. We will never be able to compete with China in terms of number of people. I think that's fair to say. We should be able to compete with them in the number of good ideas. And from my vantage point, I get to see some of the best ideas around the country. I can tell you, I'm extremely optimistic about the ideas that are coming out from universities, startup companies, national labs, etc. This is amazing stuff. And we sort of beat ourselves a little bit. Oh, we're getting, we're not. No, we are the best right now. Now, if you look at the Chinese 5-year plan, you'll find that they are looking at our playbook and said, we need to focus on innovation. Great, that's great. That's a little bit of competition. Wonderful. And what we should be doing is looking at their market and seeing how do we take this, this innovation ecosystem out here, unleash that with manufacturing and all, and look at the global market and our local market. So that's the kind of thing that we need to plan out. And if we right, use our own playbook in the right way, we can compete.
Brendan, go ahead.
Innovation is often defined by many of us as the technologies that drive new product creation. But another way America can stay competitive with China and other countries is to have innovation be a central feature of the manufacturing environment. In other words, in China or other countries, how do you compete with a U.S. product? You do it at lower cost with manual labor. Manual labor often leads to lower quality products, throwaway products, and so forth, which are ultimately not very green if they're being used for very short periods of time. So their embedded cost is actually much higher than what they're actually sold for. So having high production volume, low cost, but high quality, innovative manufacturing technologies is another way to compete. And at the federal level, we encourage that. That's very important. There was a program in the DoD called ManTech at one point, a manufacturing technology program that spoke to that. And the DoD today is a very strong advocate of that. In fact, I would encourage whoever isn't from that Michigan entrepreneurial company doing clean foundry development to talk to the DoD and see what you could do for them. I think that'd be a really important funding source. I'm happy to speak with you as well. But the folks that are thinking about innovation purely at the technology level, I think if we can expand that definition to embrace manufacturing, we can stay competitive globally using that same entrepreneurial spirit, using the national labs, using the academic institutions, and really penetrate the cost structure that lets us stay globally competitive on a sustained basis.
We're running a bit behind, so we have time for one more question. Right. Ben?
I'm Sandy Apgar from Baltimore. About the built environment and specifically ARPA-E, if I have that right, and as an alumnus of DoD, is there a priority project, a program for the built environment, and particularly for the process of producing and managing the built environment? We have a huge sector of the economy, roughly 20%, but highly inefficient because of history and policy and structure. And I never thought, frankly, until this morning, that a center of excellence of innovation intellectually in your unit could do for that aspect of the built environment what actually DoD and others have done in other respects, and produce enormous breakthroughs if you could focus on wood, on process, not just products.
Well, let me wear my bigger hat than just RPE hat as representing the Department of Energy. I should say, before I even say that, that before I came to the DOE, I, in fact, testified in front of the Senate on exactly this particular issue, on buildings and how to reduce energy consumption in buildings and built environment as a whole. The Department of Energy has, if you look at there's a buildings program that has invested significantly in the R&D, but not just R&D in the demonstration, getting the financing, et cetera, the Better Buildings Initiative. There is as you know, it is a very fragmented industry for the built environment. You needed the ability, this is where the federal government can be a convener in many ways. There's a buildings energy innovation hub that is there in Pennsylvania, but it's actually nationwide, but it's based in the Navy Yard in Philadelphia. If you ever get a chance, go there and see what's going on. And you have a microgrid out there, the buildings, et cetera. So there's a lot of activity going on in this area, and it is an area where it uses 75% of the electricity. So we have to make it much more efficient. In the RPE side, we looked at what the rest of the DOE is doing and say, where is the white space, if you may, that the RPE could focus on? And that's a partnership between RPE and the rest of DOE. And we focused on, we saw lighting program already there that has been covered by the rest of the Department of Energy. We focused on HVAC because that is, heating and cooling is about 40–50% of the building energy consumption. And we found that we are a factor of 10 away from the theoretical limit in air conditioning. And I know we have been using air conditioning since Carrier, 1928. But we said that instead of making incremental improvement in the compressor or the desiccant and things like that, let's take a quantum leap and put the target as in a factor of 10, let's put a factor somewhere in between. And we call that program Beat It. Building energy efficiency through integrated thermal devices. So beat the target. And what you get is, you get scientists and engineers excited. So here's a challenge, here's some money, go for it. And you find innovation then. Competition is a good thing in that respect. And we're finding amazing innovation of removing humidity from air and then cooling it so that you don't have the latent heat load. I won't go into the technical details. But it's fair to say, amazing innovation coming out to reduce the energy consumption, to reduce the greenhouse effect of hydrofluorocarbons. This is a huge effect, about 2,000 times more than CO2, the refrigerants, and at cost. Cost is very important. So there's a lot of, so stay tuned on that one. I will give you more updates if you want.
I think we learned one thing in this panel is that ARPA-E is great at coming up with acronyms.
That's the Friday evening happy hour.
I want to thank the panel for really a very valuable, excellent conversation. And our next panel discussion is going to be looking at the clean economy by regions, and it's going to be led by Mark Miro, who's a Brookings Senior Fellow and Policy Director at the Metropolitan Policy Program, who really helped put together the research for this paper. So I'll leave it to him.
Whoops, I'm working off